Hello, this is Chris Nelson for evolveconsciousness.org. Today I will be reading Admit Wrong and Imagine Better. This is Self-Knowledge Barriers Part 2. This is based on What on Earth is Happening, episode number 6, podcast number 6. I've taken the information from there and I've made it into my own and added some information of my own, and so it's the same thing as the other articles that are based on podcasts from Mark Passio. Take the information and put it back out in my own words, in my own way. Unlearning and admitting wrong. Understanding who we are, what we are doing here, and what is taking place within and around us is restricted by barriers to awakening consciousness, self-realization, self-knowledge, etc., that in turn prevent us from facing ourselves. Letting go of the attachment to illusions is the way to learn who we truly are. A person may need to experience the natural law results of their erroneous conceptions not working out for them. As they think, so they feel, and so they act and behave with an erroneous belief as the driving force. These would be the axioms. You'd have a false axiomatic belief that drives you and motivates you in life. Leads you places. If you want a definition on axiom, look up the article or audio on truth, which is the first one, or I have a more recent article on axioms, existence, consciousness, and identity. So eventually we need to admit and accept something to begin the spiritual journey towards truth. And what we need to accept is, I was wrong. Here's a quote by an unknown person that I found. Every mile you go in the wrong direction is really a 2-mile error. Unlearning is twice as hard as learning. So I'll just read it now. There's another quote by Confucius underneath the next paragraph. A man who has committed a mistake and doesn't correct it is committing another mistake. So that's the same thing as what I just read above. Every mile you go in the wrong direction is really a 2-mile error. So until you correct your path and go back on the straight and narrow, the right way and path, you're on the wrong, crooked, winding, diverted path going off the middle straight towards the truth. If you keep going in the wrong direction, you're going even further down the wrong way and further into your own problems, you are your own worst enemy. And to unlearn is twice as hard as learning, because you have to remove what you thought was false and then put something back in its place. Whereas when you're empty, you just put things in and then you just accept them blindly, which is how we're all order followers, following orders from our parents who tell us how reality is. Or we follow orders from television media, which creates images in our mind about how reality is. I can personally attest to the self-realization of how I was wrong, how much we are currently being tricked, conned, deceived, manipulated, lied to, bamboozled, hoodwinked, screwed, fooled, duped, as the first necessary step in the spiritual journey. Once we can come to terms accepting how wrong we are as a result of being lied to and manipulated, we can then choose to continue making the same mistakes by accepting false notions and continue to be deceived through our ignorance, or we can recognize that we no longer want to be deceived, manipulated, and lied to, and choose to reconstruct our perception of reality in accordance with the opposite of the current lies, manipulation, and deception, which is to align with the truth, the reality, what is. Only through admitting we are wrong, when we are wrong, can we learn what is right and stop making the same mistakes. Here's an infographic. To admit that you were wrong is to declare that you are wiser now than you were before. It's always a process of removing the falsity, removing the evil, removing the immorality. You admit wrong, and now you're wiser because hopefully you've dropped that thing that you were doing that was wrong, and you're no longer doing it. And if you're still doing it, then you're not wise yet. You only understand the difference between a right and a wrong, and you still have to actualize yourself in alignment with that right. We do not like to admit we are wrong because everyone wants to be right. Tell me one person who wants to do the wrong thing. We all strive to do what is right, and we fail often. We do not want to admit that we missed something simple or obvious that led us to make an error. It is hard to accept we were fooled, tricked, and bought into deceptions. Our conditioned ways of thinking and ego defenses prevent us from facing ourselves honestly. Many people also think if something was true, then more people would be talking about it, therefore they can ignore it as even possible and not require further inquiry. They do not understand the occulted nature of reality because they are unaware. We live in a constructed perception of reality, conditioned into us soon after birth, when we become capable of receiving information and making distinctions. The environment we grow up in is including everything we see, hear, and experience from our own perception and that of others that shapes our ego personality identity construct. What we do is largely based on the views and beliefs that are conditioned into us without us questioning them to determine their veracity and validity of acceptance. It is important to want to know what is right from what is wrong, what is true from what is false, so that we can then express truth and what is right as opposed to expressing what is false and wrong. Being right is not about wanting to be right about everything that you believe in. Being right is about having acquired the accurate information and understanding to the degree that you can live in harmony and in alignment and in accordance with what is right, good, and true. Being right is not about wanting to be right even when you're wrong. It is about wanting to have the right, good, and true understanding about something as opposed to a false and wrong and bad understanding of something that will lead you down the wrong path. This is what being right is. Again, being right is not about the desire to maintain an adherence and belief in falsehoods and lies just because they are what we currently believe and allow us to feel good about ourselves. This is an ego-driven to be right even when we are not right. To want to be right involves wanting to know what is right and dropping what is wrong and false once you understand what is wrong and false. Being right is to live in right and not to live in wrong. Being right is admitting we are wrong, dropping it so that we can adopt, align, and harmonize with what is right. We must empty our teacups of our previous tacitly accepted conditioning and reevaluate what we accept to be true. As Yoda says, you must unlearn what you have learned. Here's a quote by G.I. Gurdjieff. A man must first of all understand certain things. He has thousands of false ideas and false conceptions, chiefly about himself, and he must get rid of them, and he must get rid of some of them before beginning to acquire anything new. Otherwise, the new will be built on a wrong foundation, and the result will be worse than before. To speak the truth is the most difficult thing in the world. One must study a great deal and for a long time in order to speak the truth. The wish alone is not enough. To speak the truth, one must know what the truth is and what a lie is, and first of all in oneself. And this nobody wants to know. So yeah, nobody wants to know the truth about themselves. They don't want to look into the mirror and face all the wrongs they do, all the immorality and evil that they perpetuate and participate in. So they don't want to take the time that is required in order to learn a great deal of study, time and time and time. Time over action, inner work versus outer work. You need the time to learn before you can act effectively, because if you don't take the time to learn, then all the action you're going to take is going to be based on false preconceptions that were ingrained into you as a child, that you just blindly followed as orders from your parents and the media and school and society, and you're going to be building on top of that. You need to Learn all the falsity and all the bullshit in order to build correctly. The more you remove, the more accurate your construction will be, but it's still not enough. You need to take a certain amount of years to figure out what's wrong. Do not start to build without figuring out what's wrong, because you're going to be building on top of what's wrong. If you want more information on this, I have a 3-hour, 40-minute audio with 23 infographics entitled Foundational Living and True Unity. And it talks about building a foundation and what a foundation is and how unity works. And I also have the infographics on time learning versus action and inner work versus outer work. People just don't want to do the work. That's the problem. They don't understand how their mind works and how they're full of false ideas and they're living as a false self. To continue, I want to have access to and propagate what is right, not simply think of myself as being right when I have accepted and propagated something that is wrong. I want to know when I am wrong so that I can stop being wrong. I don't want to live in my own make-believe fantasy world. I want to live in the truth of what is reality. Some people view being right as being arrogant or ego-driven. As a result of not caring about being right, they do not value correctness and accuracy as being part of truth, and therefore do not value truth in the way they live. I used to live with someone like this, a New Ager. Oh, you're just trying to be right. Yeah, I'm trying to express what is right, because I know what's right, and you don't, and you're just living in falsity. And then you want to tell me, invalidate what I say, not based on what I'm saying, but just based on a perception that you think I want to be right. Not that I want to express what's right and learn what's false and drop everything that's false within me so that I can become more right. No, everything that I say is just because I want to be right. It's not that I want to express what's right and then share what's right, good and true. No, I just want to be right, even when I'm wrong. So then I can just dismiss what you're saying. No. You have to actually look at what the person is saying. And if they're saying bullshit, well, then you can just say, well, yeah, if you think this is right, maybe you have this fixation on being right even when you're wrong. Because I can demonstrate how you're wrong. And if the person doesn't care about what's right, well, then yeah, then they're in the ego of only wanting to be right themselves. They don't really care about truth and morality. There's people like this all over the internet, all over the planet. They pretend to say that they're for truth and the trivium and all these things. But all over the place, they're just lying all over. And they can't see it because they're not able to face themselves honestly. They don't really care for truth and morality. Since they do not value what is right, what is correct, what is accurate, and what is true, and therefore what is good, then they don't really have any issue with maintaining false ideologies and conceptions of being lied to, manipulated, and deceived. If you do not care about the correctness, accuracy, rightness, and truthfulness of the things that you accept to represent the reality you live in, then you are quite content to continue to believe the fantasy fairy tale of deceptions and lies that keeps you enslaved to prevent you from self-realization. For me, it was sometime in August of 2006, I watched Terror Storm and realized there was so much I didn't know about, so much horrible behavior going on within our own system. I could either ignore this information and continue the triviality of my life, wasting my time with nonsense, or I could change my behavior to alleviate my ignorance of reality, of what is, of the truth, and seek out knowledge and understanding of truth in order for my conceptions to align with reality, to become more correct, more accurate, and more true. The first step is to admit that we are wrong and we have been lied to and fooled, and then make a choice to change that or remain in ignorance. We are where we are because we choose the latter and take the easy road of abdicating our personal responsibility. And that's the personal responsibility to truth and morality, to stand for truth and morality after you learn about truth and morality, because you're serving truth and morality and you're sacrificing your own personal stupid life for something greater such as truth and morality. Yes, when I say own personal stupid life, I'm talking about what everyone does. Have fun, enjoy life, pleasure gratification, Ooh, distractions, entertainment, gossip, TV, movies, sports, shopping, blah blah blah, useless conversations about people. Here's a quote by Krishnamurti. What will bring peace is inward transformation, which will lead to outward action. Inward transformation is not isolation, is not withdrawal from the outward world. Is not withdrawal from outward action. On the contrary, there can be right action only when there is right thinking, and there is no right thinking if there is no self-knowledge. Without knowing yourself, there is no peace. An ideal is merely an escape, an avoidance of what is, a contradiction of what is. An ideal prevents direct action upon what is. To have peace, we will have to love, and we will have to begin not to live an ideal life, but to see things as they are and act upon them, transform them. So what he's saying about an ideal, I'm just going to make a point. An ideal isn't bad. An ideal is what we strive for. An ideal is the state we want to create. It's an image that we want to strive for. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, the ideal he's talking about is where we have an image in our mind that we're actually living in the ideal state, where our actual current condition is an ideal, which prevents us from facing the reality correctly and seeing things as they are, to act upon them properly and actually work to make our way of living an ideal that we think it already is. That's why people live in a fantasy and in illusions. They live in make-believe unreality because they don't see things as they are. To continue, we can grasp certain aspects of knowledge about ourselves and external reality. It isn't merely perception and pretending reality, morality, and truth don't exist. Making decisions as we go along based on our initial limited perceptions and levels of comfort do not promote what is actually good. Our actions that please and benefit us may result in suffering to others. Truth is simple once it is understood, but can seem complex due to confusion created by those who attempt to obfuscate it. Without prerequisite understandings of foundational principles, the simplicity of more complex truth can elude us. A failure to immediately grasp higher truths can lead us to believe that they are unattainable, which is believing there is no truth or that it cannot be known, and this is a basis for solipsism. We then decide to believe whatever we want to based on our perceptions at the time and become arbiters of truth as gods. Man's dictates of law become the basis for how we live our life. A realization must occur that we are not gods of reality deciding what the truth and morality is based on our perceptions and comfort level. Most of what we consider right and acceptable is conditioned and determined by those around us as we grow up. The truth of natural law can be verified through experience. It is a process in our lives. We can come to know and understand natural law by recognizing the results of the processes through which it manifests. Understanding the manifestations of consciousness, which is part of knowing ourselves and the principles of natural law, are the solution. We have to face ourselves and the current condition we have co-created. We are able to develop our conscience, to know right from wrong, and choose the higher moral ground over the lower easy ground. Natural law is doing what is morally right, not what we believe and accept is right based on our perceptions. The phrase Aleister Crowley coined in The Law of Thelema, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," is actually about doing what is in accordance with the higher will that is natural law. Not harming another or violating any of their rights is what we have the moral right to do. Once we violate the natural law rights of another being, we drop in consciousness from being in alignment with the higher will of natural law principles to doing our own personal egoic will. We make up our own right and wrong. When we make up our own right and wrong, we can justify anything as moral. If you do an association with higher will, creation, and natural law, they are all related. Higher will is what is responsible for creation and the universal cosmic natural moral law in creation. Therefore, aligning with the laws of creation, which is natural law, is aligning with and coming into harmony with higher will. It is simple once we look at it. Similarly, we can substitute higher self for higher will, and this is all about self-realization, which is alignment and harmonization of ourselves as an individuated unit of consciousness with the higher order principles, higher will, higher self, natural law, set forth to bring us that which we truly desire, freedom and peace. This is what the information already presented has been talking about, the forces of love and fear, and the expressions of natural law. Our ignorance of natural law is a result of the ignorance of those who teach us in our lives. The blind lead the blind. That's our parents before them, everyone in society. It's just blind idiots leading blind idiots and creating more conditioned blind idiots. The way out is for us to understand principles of truth like natural law. We can educate ourselves into learning aspects of truth about the reality we live in and ourselves. As each individuated unit of consciousness develops willpower and changes, the reality we co-create through the manifestations of our consciousness as we interact with the pre-existing reality is also changed. The whole is a reflection of the smaller units. The way we choose to live is sourced from our thoughts, feelings, and actions. The world we live in is a result of these manifestations of consciousness. If we choose to change our ways of living together, we can live in this reality on Earth in a different way than we currently are. We need to act and behave differently, and we will get different results. If we act in the right way that is in alignment with what we say we want to produce, then we will get it. The next section is identification and imagination. Here's a quote by Joseph Chilton Pearce. It says, "To live a creative life, we must lose our fear of being wrong." So the title of the article, Admit Wrong and Imagine Better. So I've been talking about how we can't admit wrong and how we need to admit wrong. And even in the part 1 of Self-Knowledge Barriers on Worldview and Choices, it was about how we can't admit wrong. So to live a creative life, to create, creative imagination, we must lose our fear of being wrong. So first you got to admit wrong, then you can imagine and create a better life. That's the title of my article. Explaining these principles to others is not about being careful about someone's sensibilities and false worldview. Explaining this is not about arrogance or ego. The way things are needs to be spoken about by more people, just as deception and lies are being propagated and accepted through television and other means. Principles of truth need to be propagated so that other people stop creating their own self-inflicted suffering. Information is out there if we choose to access it. Coming across something that makes more sense to explain reality requires us admitting we are wrong from time to time. We have been and will continue to be wrong at various times in life. Refusal to admit wrongdoings is a barrier to harmony with natural law. Some people have the hardest time admitting that they have accepted, bought into, and identified with a deceptive belief for much of their lives. Belief is more powerful than knowledge because people become very attached to what they think they know. Taking a belief away can be like taking a part of someone's identity. As a result, many do not want to recognize and acknowledge the darkness in what we have become. Hidden occulted influences need to be faced and made known. Many people reject this as well because they believe either this occulted thing could not have escaped their attention their whole lives, or they don't believe in it so it has no effect on their lives. This is a fallacy to think that someone needs to hold a particular belief for that belief to have an effect upon their lives. Ignorance is not bliss. What we don't know does have an influence on our lives. By facing reality, we can heal. Here's a quote by Paul Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's Minister of Propaganda. "The essence of propaganda consists in winning people over to an idea so sincerely, so vitally, that in the end they succumb to it utterly and can never escape from it." And this ties into my article on truth and related to solipsism. And it relates to axioms as well in the truth article. But solipsism, because of the biggest lie, the more you can convince someone of something and have them base their lives upon it as an axiomatic foundational belief, then the more likely they are to never let go of it and be completely submerged in its grasps, having a complete hold on their lives and the way they live. And it's only a belief, it's not a reality, it's not truth, but it gets created into reality through the unreality of our minds. Propaganda is the propagation of an idea, either true or false, it doesn't matter. The implicit use of the word is to characterize lies that are being spread. We currently have a false reality based in deception and lies being propagated by other minds for us to accept and buy into. It is what currently exists in reality, but only because we are running someone else's program of life. Mind control over our lives is being implemented in the form of chemicals in our food and water, information through what we spend time on and pay attention to, and our belief in false concepts. Our attachment to believing we are right even when evidence is presented to demonstrate wrong is ego identification with what we currently accept. We have taken it into ourselves as part of our identity in some way. Ego identification is a great barrier to self-awareness and self-realization. Ego identification with false beliefs is mind control. Once we understand enough about ourselves and the nature of our being, we will be less susceptible to the influence of mind control and its influence over our lives. Remaining attached to the illusory beliefs prevents us from realizing who we are, what we are capable of, and the many possibilities we can choose from to change our ways of living. It is our choice to free ourselves or to continue to suffer by being the same way and doing the same things. So realize is realize, real lies. I have the infographic frequency of perceptions and truth, where our frequency of our consciousness and perceptions is aligning with the constant of truth. The more we align our perceptions with reality, the more we align with truth, and the higher our frequency vibratory rate of consciousness goes. And that's evolving consciousness by learning about reality and accepting it. Aligning our perceptions with reality by seeing with real eyes provides us with the vision to perceive truth from falsehood. Accurately perceiving the truth is the solution to our self-inflicted suffering by providing us with the imagination to envision another way. If you cannot imagine change, then there's no way to bring that change into manifestation. Imagination is the aspect of thought that creates everything. Our imagination is being stifled so that we do not think and see the possibilities of how to get out of our current condition. Mind control is the control of thought and by extension imagination. If we cannot see another way or understand how it can be possible, then we are void of possibilities to effect any real change. We then become comfortable accepting our current situation without doing anything about it, and even refusing to do anything about it. With mind control in place in its various manifestations, a psychological symptom develops called dissociation. Dissociation is like cognitive dissonance, where certain thoughts, emotions, such sensations, or memories are compartmentalized due to them overwhelming the integrative capacity of the conscious mind. So I just want to say this is like trauma, where you dissociate from the experience and you put it into your subconscious mind so that your conscious mind doesn't have to integrate and deal with it because it's too overwhelming for the conscious mind to deal with. This results from an attachment to a fundamentally false worldview. We fight to keep that worldview standing because we associate some aspect of it with our self-concept, self-image, and identity. And that's the end of this article. The next one will be the illusions of our senses, which I might have to do some review because it deals with the quantum experiments and the double slit experiment. in order to explain the foundation for reality, which many delusional pseudo-spiritualists, pseudo-thinkers conclude that, oh, there's no solidity. Well, that just makes you an idiot who doesn't do their homework and tries to deny reality. Anyways, I guess that'll be a rant for the next audio or another time. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I hope you enjoyed. So have a nice day. Take care. Peace.